Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome to episode 262 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, jaysfromthecouch.com. We're happy you're tuning in for another week of Blue Jays talk, whether it's on our live stream on YouTube and Facebook, on Twitter. We really appreciate everybody tuning in and asking those questions live on the show, adding your 2 cents, as it were. And as well, if you missed that live stream, of course, you can catch it in the archives of our YouTube channel. Just look for Jays from the Couch. But also the audio version of our podcast is available from all fine podcast providers. Everywhere you look, you'll find Jays from the Couch. So give us a look there. So we've got a great episode for you this week. We're going to look at some Blue Jays trade discussion. And of course, I'm your host, Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, we've got a great episode. It's going to be fun. We're going to look at the Blue Jays and where they could, should, might go for help, for additions to their roster. And it'll probably lead us to their catching situation as well. And to help me do that, I've got who have become podcast mainstays at this point. First of all, the host of Sunny Side of the Dome on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the one and only Karen Sutar. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Sean.
And joining us from the land down under, us. down. Oh, man. I'm out, Karen. It's already a mess, and we're only like 2 minutes in. Anyway, from our U.S. correspondent, the host of the On Feck Circle, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel, Steve Feck. Good evening to you, sir.
Hi, Sean. Hi, Karen. Now, in fairness, it should be pointed out that Karen is the main, and I'm the stay. I'm like that guest that just never goes home at the end of the night. And you keep looking at your watch like, God, just go.
Right.
Okay. So I want to make sure that listeners and people watching on YouTube understand the roles and the dynamics. So.
It's true. I asked if I could call you a cab, and you didn't get it. It was awkward. Anyway, but so today, I read a little thing on Major League Baseball had a trade chip from every team across baseball, and some were interesting. Some I had to look up because I'd never heard of them. Some prospects in that list that you may not necessarily find quickly on the top prospect lists around baseball. But first of all, the Toronto Blue Jays were listed, and their trade chip, as it were, was simply catching depth. And obviously, when you look at the roster, you've got Danny Jansen and Reese McGuire. Currently, Alejandro Kirk is on the 60-day IL with his hip. The man is old before his time. And then, of course, their depth in the system as well. Catcher with Gabriel Marino and Riley Adams and so on. It's looking pretty good for one of the best farm systems in baseball, first of all. At a position, and we were kind of talking about this before we went on air here, Steve, you said that the catcher position around baseball is a very, very kind of shallow,
woefully, yes,
dirty pool, right? So it for Toronto, it's a good position to be in, right? So Karen, I'm going to start with you, and just I guess overall, let's kind of, before we get into the what could, would, or should they do, where do you see the Blue Jays right now as far as looking at a trade deadline coming up, and potentially even off-season deals as well?
Right. I mean, I think they were asked not that long ago. I honestly, there's been so much information, I don't even remember if it was Atkins or Shapiro who was asked, but one of them were asked not that long ago, and the answer was that we are going to be aggressive in trying to improve the team, and that's not necessarily limited to this year's trade deadline, because there is that, and I really do think they're going to try to do things, but they aren't necessarily going to stop there. I mean, they've improved the team. They improved the team last year at the trade deadline, and some of that has carried over to this season. And they improved it in the off season, and I think they're going to continue to move forward.
All right. Yeah, Steve, I'm going to throw it to you. Same question. Where do you see them? Not necessarily about where, like, what would, could, or should they do, but just the position that the Blue Jays find themselves in right now.
For the first time, I'm really wondering: are they gonna make the big deal at the deadline? Are they going to be in position come July 30th or 31st or whatever day that it is, that it's worth them putting the chips in? I think it might be an issue of a little too late going in. I mean, they have organizational depth. I was surprised they didn't go with middle infielders, because I would think that's really, I mean, yes, they've got 5 catchers and they have a bunch of middle infielders, at every level. I thought they would list some of their younger middle infielders as potential trade chips, but I don't know. I think that question's being asked in a lot of cities. In the division, that's being asked in New York. Does Brian Cashman really think the Yankees should try to go after somebody? Because I don't know that I think the Yankees have less of a chance making the playoffs than the Blue Jays do.
Yeah, things don't look good in New York, and that's okay with me. You know what I mean? Like, if somebody blew up the Death Star, that's quite all right with me.
Okay. Well, now again, Buffalo is in New York, so you need to say New York City. You really shouldn't say New York.
True.
Because the Blue Jays are playing in New York. So.
Yes, and I would hope, for now, I would hope that people who are regular listeners of this podcast and who know me would know that anything to do with the Yankees is what I'm referring to, because they are the Yankees and I hate them. So, listen, if you're tuning into a Blue Jays podcast and you are upset because somebody said they hate the Yankees, then, it might not be the podcast for you.
Change the channel.
But keep listening though, and subscribe and all that stuff if that's you. But last year, and I had this thought today, how like thoughts just randomly appear to you out of nowhere. I was buckling my 4-year-old into his car seat, and I had this thought just pop into my head. Last year, the Blue Jays very easily could have kind of rode out the 2020 season. It was, in many ways, a write-off season for a number of reasons, and for a number of teams. Toronto could have been one of those, right? A young team, very young, really, no real expectations on them, even with expanded playoffs, but they didn't. Right? Robbie Ray, Taijuan Walker, they addressed their pitching needs, and they didn't have to. Maybe the incentive of making the playoffs in an expanded year was appealing, but this is not a front office that's going to just, dump their bag of cash at the table and say, I'm all in over that 2020 situation. You know what I mean? They wouldn't, that just doesn't match their MO. So I have a feeling that if things are the way they are, at the very least, like if we fast forward 2 months from now, it's almost 2 months, but to near the end of July, and the Blue Jays are still, 5.5, 6 games out, but they're in second place in the division. I don't see how they can just ride it out, right? And that's, assuming New York keeps doing New York things and Boston somehow comes back down to earth like they should. And I know, Steve, you don't agree with me,
right.
But
very true.
But I can't see them not doing anything. You know what I mean? Like, and we've said this before. Karen, I believe, on Sunny Side of the Dome last week said, they've got guys coming back from injury in Springer and even Kirk, if you want to include him, and then Nate Pearson, if he can ever get whatever's going on there, right? So even without doing anything, they're kind of raising their floor a little bit. So it wouldn't take much, really, if you're thinking about it. It wouldn't take much for them to add a piece or whatever to improve their playoff chances. But what I will say is that I don't think you're going to see them pull an Alex Anthopoulos. I don't know that you'll ever see them do that, but they certainly wouldn't do it this season. And I'm going to quote Karen again, that they're just too much of a unfinished product at this point. So that's my little piece on it. And Steve, go ahead. I'll let you tell me how I'm wrong.
Okay. Well, the main thing, well, we know you're wrong about the Red Sox. And it's pretty much everywhere you read on MLB.com, and I watch MLB Network every day, and everybody keeps saying the Red Sox, they're for real. They hit, they pitch and well enough, they're there. But put that aside for a second.
But hold on
yes,
though.
Yes.
Major League Baseball caters to two markets: New York for the Yankees and Boston. That's it. They don't even cater to the Dodgers.
No.
So I'm just throwing that out there. I apologize for interrupting, but
No. I mean, I understand. I mean, you're stuck with Sportsnet and TSN, so I understand that you're limited in your scope of what happens down here. But literally, I have at least 3 TVs on all the time to MLB Network, and it's a constant thing in my house. I'm telling you, it's not just that. I mean, the Padres, you'd swear to God, the Padres invented baseball. Forget about Doubleday and everything else that happened, in the Elysian Fields in Hoboken in the 1800s. No. The San Diego Padres have invited, and then now they're even sucking up to the Rays, saying somehow the Rays just do it. The Rays just find a way to do it. But we'll put that argument aside for now. I don't blame you, Karen, but I promise I'll get to the point here in a second, I swear. Last year when they traded for those pitchers, yes, it was valuable if they were going to try to make one of the, however many it was, 28 playoff spots or was last year in the playoff thing. But you have to remember that organizationally, you had guys that were hurt like you have this year, but you didn't have a Trent Thornton or a Merriweather or a variety of different pitchers that you could have called up to help fill in. They had a whole bunch of pitchers, but they just weren't ready yet. So I think it made sense for them to go out and get 2 veteran arms, and thank God that they did. But, Robbie Ray is still with us. Taijuan Walker should still be with us. But it was a great move to do that because they really had to. They didn't go out and get an ace. They signed their ace in the offseason, but they went in and got 2 veteran serviceable starters that could eat up innings and could get them over the hump. So that's really why they made those moves last year. I don't want to say they did it to be competitive. I think that would be unfair.
Okay. So, Karen, what I heard Steve say is A, he had praise for the front office, and B, that this year's
I don't think I said that.
No, I'm reading between the lines.
Okay, if you're hungry and you open your fridge and there's nothing in there but moldy cheese and spoiled milk, you're going to go shopping. Okay, you're not going to stay hungry. You're going to go shopping. So they kind of had to.
Okay, and that's fair. That's fair. But the other thing that I heard Steve say, Karen, was that this year's version of the Toronto Blue Jays has more in the fridge. Right, so the floor is better.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think they're better this season. I think they made the moves that they made last year, and this is something that I've talked about as well in the past. That there's a difference. Excuse my throat. There's a difference between going for it and going all in. And if you've got expanded playoffs like there were last year where 8 teams in each 15-team league make the playoffs, it's worth making that playoff spot Even if you pretty much know that you're not winning it all last year, just to help with the development of that core of players. Yes, a number of them won with the Fisher Cats in 2018, but it's a little different making the playoffs in Major League Baseball. And I think they were willing to do make the moves that they made last year in order to get the core that experience and help them to build. And I think that's what's happened. And I mean, when you stop and think about it, so yes, Robbie Ray is still here, which, as I've said before, they traded for him. It was an expiring contract. I don't think he signs with the Blue Jays if they didn't trade for him last year. So, in a way, in a roundabout sort of way, they traded for someone who they were able to retain for this year. And he's been a quality arm. Taijuan Walker, wish they'd re-signed him. They didn't, unfortunately. But then there's Ross Stripling. They traded for him. He's under team control, and he's still under team control next year even. He's arbitration eligible. Like, no wonder they had to give up Kendall Williams and who else? Nash Knight or someone. Anyway, they gave up someone else, a couple of guys that could have decent careers, at least some potential there, because you've got this team control and there's this pitcher who has been good in the past, and lo and behold, knock on wood, it seems like he's rediscovered that form again. So I hope that can continue. And I think it's worth going for making the playoffs this year. I'm not talking about trading away a Nate Pearson or an Austin Martin or someone who has a really, really good chance to help this team in the future. But there's another, I mean, this for one of the better farm systems in baseball, there are other levels of prospects in the Jays system, and there are guys who they could part with that other teams might value, that it won't kill them to be without, and they can still move forward.
Right, which begs the question then, how big a move are we potentially looking at here? Right, because the bigger the move, the more you have to give up, right? And that's, that's where we look at what do they need. Well, I think it was Ben Nicholson Smith wrote on Sportsnet that an offensive addition wouldn't be such a bad idea, and I don't hate the idea, but if you look at what they need, and so if you're following that line of thought, then maybe a third baseman, maybe a catcher, right? Because, Danny Jansen, Reese McGuire are improving. But if we're looking at improving the offense, there are only really two spots that you can legitimately say and point to and say, that's the obvious spot. But that completely ignores the need for pitching. So while that would be nice, I think, and Steve's right, like, a frozen, deep and delicious chocolate cake would be nice, but you need something else in the fridge to eat, right? So the priority is pitching, but where do you target if you're the Blue Jays? Steve, do you target starting pitching? Do you target the bullpen? Or do you do a little from a column A and a little from column B?
Well, all along I've said you need to go for that starter. I think if you had that big number 2 starter or number 1A starter, then you can put up with Steven Matz being a little bit up and down, because you're getting a lot more ups than he's put up the last couple of years in New York. You can deal with Robbie Ray. It's going to happen. He's going to have one of those 8-walk no-hitter games, going into a 5th inning or something. Yeah, it's going to happen. You can weather that if you have 2 reliable pieces at the top of your rotation. They're not going to win every game. They're not going to pitch at the top of every game, but it puts in the opponent's minds, boy, we really have to do everything right to beat these guys. So I'm going to say, of course, it's got to be starting pitching. But as I alluded to earlier when we first started talking about this, I think you're going to have to start looking in the mirror more and more. Are you really, because you have to look about how you're playing against teams like the Astros. I want to see how they do against the White Sox on the road. The Rays beat their butt last time they were in. The Red Sox have had their numbers so far. You have to wonder, okay, do the Blue Jays have enough? Did they wait? Again, I'm saying they waited too long. It's not the players' fault. It's the front office. They waited too long. They had that window. They were in a position of advantage, and they didn't take advantage of it. They sat there and said, well, we've got the top farm system, and we're this, and we have this. And so that's going to put us in the perfect position. People are going to come to us for players. They needed to strike when they did, when the Rays were down and all these other teams were struggling, and they didn't do that. So now you have to sit back and say, okay, yeah, we need a starter. Do we really want to use those chips now, or do we want to wait till the offseason for to make those moves?
So, Karen, I'm going to throw it to you. Do you go starting pitching? Because if you target the rotation, then somebody like somebody who can eat innings, and that'll only also benefit the bullpen, right? So, Karen, if you were in charge, where is your focus?
Yeah, I guess if there's a quality starting pitcher out there that can be had for not too ridiculous a price, but then again, what I'm willing to give up is a lot more if there is team control beyond this season. If they can get somebody good, that's going to be around at least for next year, where I think, the core has got another year of development under their belt. And I think all things being equal, their chances are going to be that much better next year to not only go into the playoffs, but go deep into the playoffs. I'll tell you what I would do. And these are things that I've heard that actual GMs do. So you've got your blackboard and just, any target of interest, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, because you're not going to have the opportunity to get absolutely all of them. I mean, I even think back to 1993 when the Jays were on their way to winning back-to-back World Series championships. And the rumor getting close to the trade deadline is that they were interested in Randy Johnson. Well, that fell through for whatever reason. And so they shifted their attention and got Ricky Henderson instead. So, and the quote that I heard was, if we can't reduce scoring by half a run a game, we'll increase our scoring by half a run a game. I mean, either way, if you're winning games 2-1 or 6-5, as long as you're winning, then you're winning. So I think their priority should be quality starting pitching. But again, you've got to look at so many different options, because even if you don't get your plan A, B, or C, then look at a D or an E. And I'm convinced that Marcus Semien was a D or an E, that he wasn't necessarily their first choice going into the off season. And look what they got. They got a very quality player.
Yep. And I think, any GM worth their salt has a number of different ideas on the go. You can't be hyper focused on the one. So, Steve, before we get into the Blue Jays and what chips they have available, I wanted to ask you, because you've been a proponent of making the trade sooner as opposed to waiting. So, if you heard that Toronto landed Max Scherzer tomorrow, think about how happy you would be, right? If you had heard that Toronto landed Max Scherzer on July 30th, are you going to be are you going to hate the idea?
If there are 2 games, if there are 2 or 3 games above 500, I'm going to hate the idea, because it's you talk about GMs worth their salt. That's rubbing salt in the wound of Blue Jay fans that have been saying all along, they need to act. We need pitching now. And if you wait till July 30th, if you do it May 30th, how many starts you're basically losing 6 starts. And where the Jays are now, they can't afford to give away 6 starts of a Max Scherzer caliber kind of pitcher.
Right.
So you can for a Robbie Ray or Taiwan Walker kind of pitcher that they acquired at the deadline, because again, I mean, they're great pitchers, but they're not Max Scherzer. They're not whatever other pitcher that might be out there, on the trade market that you could pick up. It's a totally different discussion. If you waited that long, then I'm sorry. And I know, Karen, you're going to say, well, you don't know what the other team's asking. You don't know what the other team's doing. Just belly up to the bar, take that bag of money or bag of prospects and say, okay, I dare you not to make this deal, because you know what's going to happen? Of course, this is where I'm not a GM. I'm going to go out to my people and say, you know what? I offered, Martin and, Kloppenstein and all these other guys, and they laughed and turned away. And now look what you got instead. I would be that kind of GM saying, you know what? I'd be transparent. That's why I love Anthopoulos. He tells you what he thinks. He's going to do it. This is what I'm going to do.
He did change his ways, though. He's not the free swinger that he once was. He's not the Kevin Pillar of GMs anymore.
Well, now again, he will be. I mean, if his team was in contention, if they were doing what they were supposed to do, I guarantee you that he'd have already made at least one, if not two, major deals. Given all the injuries to their pitcher and now losing Ozuna, if they really had not already looked in the mirror and said, you know what, we're not going to be able to put this together, Alex Anthopoulos absolutely would do it.
Well,
he's in that Dave Dombrowski, Billy Bean stratosphere of like, something has to get done. I don't care. People want to hate me. People want to make fun of me. People want to still downgrade me 5 years after I'm out of a town. I don't care. Look what I did. I tried to do something. I didn't sit there and trim my newly grown beard and look on paper and say, gee, what a great farm system. Look at us on paper. Isn't that great? And we're not playing Stratomatic. We're playing Major League Baseball. So I disagree. If Anthopoulos, if he's smart enough to know when not to go in.
Okay. We'll leave that one because we're going to run out of time. But I do want to talk about, bring this back to Toronto. Now we have somebody watching on YouTube who, and I don't read Japanese and I apologize, but they say get Chris Bryant. I'd be okay with that.
That might be Korean actually, but it doesn't matter.
Nope. Now I can read Korean actually.
Well, can you?
Having taught there, yep.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Chris Bryant would be a great addition. Be even better if he could pitch. But anyway, back to the point of this. Catching depth, Toronto has it. Not many teams can say that, first of all. Second of all, quality catching depth, Toronto has it. Not many teams can say that. So, if you're looking at, let's look at the big league roster, and I'm going to name the three of them. You've got Danny Jansen, Reese McGuire. I almost lost his name. I almost said Russ McGuire. Anyway, and Alejandro Kirk. You can't keep three. Which is, and we don't have a lot of time, so Karen, I'm going to start with you. Just which of the three do you part with, if you need to?
Right. Yeah, it's such a tough question, honestly. I mean, like Alejandro Kirk might bring them back the most value in a trade. And up until this season and looking at the minor league numbers, I might have said that I'd be reluctant to trade Kirk away. Looking at what Gabriel Moreno was doing in Double-A, like, to how much more does he need to do and how long does he need to do it before the front office starts looking at him as the catcher of the future. And if they decide that's the direction they want to go in, maybe Alejandro Kirk can be added to a trade along with whatever package and brings them back whatever. And the other interesting thing with Danny Jansen being pulled out of yesterday's game, and who knows if he'll need some time on the injured list. My guess is that the catcher that who would come up to replace him, with Kirk not yet ready to come off the IL, would be Riley Adams. And Riley Adams is tearing it up at AAA. Like, might this be a bit of a blessing in disguise if Riley Adams gets a little bit of a look at Major League Baseball and does just well enough to catch the eye of other general managers? And like I said, I'm not saying that he by himself gets the Jays Max Scherzer or anything close to it, but just being part of a package. And speaking of which, and the idea of it being too late to trade for somebody big. So a team that is 50-51 after 101 games can't possibly do anything. They can't possibly win a division. I had to throw that in there. It's not too late. Their schedule is about to get a lot easier. It sounds like they're getting George Springer back before too long. And with all the arms on the IL, I'm not saying they're all coming back, but maybe a few of them are. Maybe Thomas Hatch at some points. Maybe they even call up Patrick Murphy, who's been doing pretty well at AAA, I believe. He can be an arm in the bullpen. So, I mean, they've got pieces in-house right now that can and probably will make the team better. And going out to get another piece be a lot of fun to see.
For sure. Steve, you had to choose one of the three. Kirk, Jansen, McGuire. Who do you use to get that Scherzer tomorrow?
Okay. Well, Reese McGuire gets you nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, he gets you a veteran bullpen arm, maybe, just to fill in holes. Kirk is so intriguing because I think everybody really believes he's going to be more of a DH. So in theory, down the road, you can carry three catchers, but Kirk is your primary DH and he's your emergency catcher, or can catch one day a game or whatever it is. But I'd say Danny Jansen. When I do the game recaps for JaysFromTheCouch.com, I purposely listen to the away broadcast, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's not good. Like the case of the Yankees, it's never good. But just about every broadcast team raves about Danny Jansen. And it's usually a pitcher that's an analyst that says, I can't tell you what a great job he does calling a game and blocking pitches. I think he was, over the last 2 years, it's like above 99% of balls in the dirt he successfully blocks. He doesn't let runners advance. That's unbelievable. So I think really he can bring, he's not maybe a solo piece, but he can bring you in a package perhaps with a prospect a really nice piece. So I would say I would use those defensive metrics that Jansen has and say, okay, you really want to improve your catching? You want to really help your pitching staff? Danny Jansen's the guy. Kirk's going to hit, but Jansen's the guy. So I think I'd use Jansen.
Yeah, I think all things being equal, it's an interesting conversation. And right now the problem is they don't have their own solution, really. Right? Like Danny Jansen has struggled offensively, now being pulled from a game. Reese McGuire is a backup. I mean, nobody's going to suggest that he's an everyday player unless somebody's hurt. Alejandro Kirk isn't back yet. But as Steve said, maybe there's question about his long-term sustainability at that position. So all of those question marks, and then how much are you really going to hand over to a Riley Adams or a Gabriel Marino, and how soon, right? All of those things have to be weighed. And so really, I would, if it were me, I would be okay with them targeting Danny Jansen as a trade chip, because I think you're probably going to get the most for him because of his defensive value. And he has just enough offense. He's shown just enough offense to know, or to get other teams thinking, there's something there, right? But then I think the Blue Jays are creating a hole for themselves. that they don't have an answer for. So maybe it is Kirk who has, the most. I don't want to say he's the most expendable because I don't see it that way, but he might be the more obvious
Yeah,
to dangle.
the most valuable. The only thing I'll add to a young catcher is that Pete Walker then calls the game from the dugout. Like, really, he kind of does with McGuire. McGuire doesn't really call his own game. He may in some cases, but really, he's always looking over the dugout. I think you just have Pete Walker calling the pitches. So those young guys are not having to worry about that and constantly going to their arm and looking at the card and getting all confused. Just say, hey, look over here. Okay, so I'm going to ask him to throw a slider or a fastball, whatever it is. Take that pressure off them so they can then really worry about framing pitches and go from there.
I just had a visual in my head. Poor young catcher putting down signs. The pitcher shakes him off, and then he looks over, and then he puts down the sign again. The pitcher shakes him off, and then he's like, "What do I do?"
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's for you, it doesn't matter. You could put a rifle in the scope on Ryu, and he's only going to throw what he wants to throw. He's earned it. Okay, he's earned that right. But I mean, I'm not sure Robbie Ray or Steven Matz can be shaken off his pitching coach, saying no. I'm gonna. Yeah. This isn't Bull Durham. I'm gonna exert my presence with authority. Okay, no, you do what the pitching coach is calling. Okay, so.
All right, so we're just about out of time here. So it'll be interesting because I really think there's lots of time to make a deal. There's lots of time for this Blue Jays team to turn things around and see. I see you.
Well, because Karen was doing this, so I had to make sure that I was emphatically doing this.
I think there's lots of time, but I would also love to see something happen sooner so that you get more from whatever it is you bring in. If it's a Max Scherzer or whatever it is, it doesn't. I don't think Max Scherzer to Toronto is happening, but you get more out of it, right? And it helped turn things around because we keep saying that things are going to turn around. A little push in that direction would be nice, but. We're out of time here on episode 262, the Jays from the Couch radio podcast. So, Karen, let everybody know how they can follow you and all that stuff.
Yes, I'm on Twitter quite often at Karen Sutar1. That's SOUTAR1. And I love to chat about baseball or other things. Mutual respect is there. And say hi if you're around.
And don't forget, Sunny Side of the Dome. On Thursday evenings at 6 p.m., Karen mixes logic and positivity like nobody else. It's must-watch YouTube. I was going to say TV, but it's YouTube, right? So anyway, tune in Thursdays at 6 p.m. Steve, how can everybody follow you?
You can generally follow me to a bar here in Pittsburgh if you're in town, but
with a bag full of prospects.
Not everybody is there, yes. But you can follow me on Twitter at US of Jays. There's a US of Jays Facebook page. There's usofjays.net. And, of course, tomorrow night and every Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, I will find a way to tick you off on the On-Fixer.
Well, he says that, but he also makes you laugh, and Steve has a way of grappling with history that I actually quite enjoy. The Blue Jays Way segment, it's I kind of work the controls behind the scenes, but if I wasn't doing that and already listening, I'd be tuning in and sticking around just to hear the Blue Jays Way segment because I really thoroughly enjoy that. So
okay, so now everybody's now going to wait and. So it actually the recording goes on YouTube, and they're going to fast forward to like the 25-minute mark now. But that's okay because it's probably a smarter move.
There'll be no context. They won't know what's going on, so that's a bad idea. Anyway, thank you both. I appreciate it for tuning in or for joining me for another week, I should say, and to everybody listening and watching at home. We really appreciate it, whether it's the live stream on our YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or you're listening to the audio version wherever you found it. We really appreciate it. Give us a subscribe and all that stuff and make us feel good about ourselves. So for Karen, for Steve, for everybody at Jays from the Couch, this is Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at DoyleJFtC, hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.